There are just so many e-ink tablets that you can buy. Even just a year or two ago, it was quite a simple choice. Were you going to go with the Remarkable, the 1 or the 2, a Supernote, or a Boox device? But now, for instance, Kobo are getting involved, and you've got the larger paper and Boox Max Lumi devices, and indeed the smaller A6 size devices to choose from as well. So this video is going to be a buying guide. Hopefully this video is going to give you a hand going through the things that you'll be considering when you're thinking, which one of these devices should I buy? It's going to be basically 3 parts to this video. I'm going to talk about them and compare them on a kind of matrix, and then I'm going to try and answer some commonly asked questions, and then I'm going to think specifically towards the end of this video about 5 key uses of these devices and recommend which one you should be thinking if your main use case is one of these. So I'm going to start with the one that I'm currently testing out, which is the Kobo, and do a kind of matrix on this of different things that you can consider. I think it's worth thinking about them on a kind of matrix of ease of use, and I'm going to pop that over this side, easy to use, and fully featured. And then on this matrix, I'm going to pop size and price, because there is a definite correlation between those. A4 devices are going to be at the top, and they're also going to be the most expensive, so they're going to be the least good price. So this is like best price, and the smaller devices are going to be down the bottom. But hopefully this will help you in some way, shape, of thinking about which device is going to be the right one for you. Let's start with Boox, because they are definitely fully featured. This is going to be the Max Lumi 1 and the Max Lumi 2. And the Max Lumi 2 is actually a slightly less good price than the Max Lumi 1. If price is important to you, then maybe just go for the Max Lumi 1 because it's brilliant. It is definitely fully featured, and it's definitely not easy to use. You can get your head around it, it won't take you that long. The Quirklogic paper is the other large device, which is actually a little bit cheaper. So the Quirklogic paper is a little bit easier to use than the Max Lumi. It's a little bit cheaper as well, it's the same size. It does have less features, but that makes it in turn easier to use. And actually I do quite like using the Quirklogic paper. One thing that I love about it is it's got the 2 buttons, the highlight and the erase, but then that comes with the problem that you have to charge the stylus. Let's go into the A5 devices, which are going to come somewhere in the middle. But here I can actually think to myself, if I just say this middle area is the A5 devices, I will kind of try and list them out as the lower ones would be the best price, okay? The Boox devices, so again, fully featured. Over here, Note Air 2, it's not a bad price. I think that you probably will start to find things a little bit cheaper, and of course you could just go with the Note Air 1, which would be less expensive than the Note Air 2. The next one down would be the Supernote A5X specifically. That's got a really good balance between features and ease of use. It is quite expensive once you bought all the accessories though, I will say that about it. So let's put the Supernote A5X here. They've kind of chosen to add the right features for professionals is the way to think about that. It's a really professional device. Loads more on these comparisons in my other videos about these tablets. And then the Remarkable 2, which is definitely the least featured, but it is certainly the easiest to use. Now actually the Kobo that I'm on right now, I'm going to put somewhere in the middle as well. It is probably not quite as fully featured. It's difficult to say whether it's more or less featured or easier or harder to use than the Supernote. It probably is easier to use than the Supernote, just by a pinch, because it's kind of got that familiarity of coming from a normal e-reader. But I wouldn't necessarily say, yes, it does have slightly less features than the Supernote. I'm going to put it below this axis because it's actually a very good price. This is currently the Kobo, I think, is the cheapest way to buy an A5 e-reader if you want to make sure that you get everything with it, i.e. a stylus and a case. And then of course we've got down here the smaller devices, and they're all smaller, and that really makes them that better price. Right in the middle here you're going to have the Supernote A6X. Over this side you're going to have the Boox Nova Air. Great device as well. And then lastly, and this is one I haven't actually used, but the Mobi Scribe, I don't really know about its fully featured versus its ease of use, but it is certainly the cheapest of the whole bunch. And I think I've seen enough reviews to tell you that it's somewhere in that kind of more features, probably some quirks about using it like that. I'm pretty sure that's everything that I've tried in terms of these e-readers. these note-taking e-readers, and I hope that gives you just a kind of brief introduction as to where on this kind of matrix your device that you want is going to be. Now this is hopefully also illustrative of the reason why the Supernotes are getting such a good write-up at the minute, because they're really balanced between those features and the ease of use. So I wish it were that simple that you could just pick from a matrix like that and make your decision, but nothing in life is that simple, is it? Really stick around to the end, because I'm going to talk about use cases and the ones that I would recommend based on certain normal use cases. Now I'm going to hopefully answer some questions that you might have if you're considering buying an e-ink tablet. So why are they so expensive? Why particularly are e-ink tablets more expensive than an equivalent seeming Android or iPad device? Well, the answer is really the screen. It's a kind of common thing to ask, because you look at the tech specs and you think, wow, that doesn't seem anything special. The reason is that e-ink screen. They are just not made in the volumes that mean that they can be made as a very inexpensive device. That's a shame, but we who use them do find them to be worthwhile. But I think as more people do opt to use them, as the demand goes up, then hopefully they'll be more manufactured and they can become less expensive. So sorry about that if that puts you off straight away, but here's a piece of advice. If you're not sure whether it's the right thing for you, why not go ahead and buy one of the smaller ones, try it out, live with it for a bit, and then you can see if you want to upgrade to one of the larger ones later. I really do hope that the larger devices do come down in price, because there's something that I love about this size of tablet, whether that's an iPad or an e-ink screen. But having this size, an A4 size, is something really familiar, and therefore I find it really useful. You've got so much space to work on. It's excellent. Otherwise, of course, the other thing you could do is take a punt on a second-hand device. That might be a good way to try before you spend all the money on one of these devices. Next question then, what are the different brands? So there are quite a few brands now, and they're all a little bit different. And well, what is the difference between them? Well, they range from people that are trying to give you essentially a Android experience like any other tablet, but just to give you that e-ink screen and make it all the benefits of having the e-ink screen, through to people that are really trying to reinvent paper is their kind of stated aim, and Remarkable are trying to do paper but better. So it's like paper, but it has those digital features. So the three main brands that most people are choosing between at the moment are Supernote, Remarkable and Boox, and they kind of range on a scale of usability to features, Boox being the highest featured and Remarkable being the easiest to use. But there's also other people coming into the market now as well. Notable ones are Quirklogic, who produce this to paper, and there's also Mobiscribe, who make a smaller device. Now Kobo, which they aren't a small company, they are a traditional e-reader company, and they've started making these note-taking style tablets as well, because I think they've seen the popularity of those other devices. And then of course there's Sony, who they don't sell their own devices anymore, but they do design the hardware that Fujitsu and Quirklogic use. So Fujitsu is another one, but they're not sold in Europe. And lastly, there's quite a lot of Chinese brands that all kind of seem quite similar, and they kind of come under the umbrella of like white box kind of China tech, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I wouldn't expect that to be the easiest to use straight out of the box. You might have to work around some pretty quirky tech, and you wouldn't expect the updates to be regular and everything to be running smoothly on the software side straight away. I could be wrong, but if you're one of those companies, then send me the devices and I'll test them out. And there are a few companies out there that are getting involved, that are doing startups. At the minute, I would probably stick with one of the brands that I've listed out there. What size of e-ink tablet is right for you? Well, what I'd say is if you primarily want a reader that you just want to happen to take notes on, I'd go for one of the smaller ones. These are the 7.8 inch size, essentially an A6 size device. If you want a good balance between reading and writing, and if your main use is writing, I would certainly suggest to go for at least the A5 size. And if you are somebody who is going to do reading of academic PDFs and use it primarily for work, and if the price isn't putting you off too much, then yeah, by all means, go for an A4 size one. I love using this size of device. Again, it might be about portability. The smaller ones will be the most portable, and you'll be able to fit them even in a handbag. The A5 ones do go really nicely in any bag, But most bags, laptop bags and things, are kind of designed to hold something that's like an A4 folder size, most professional bags. So there's nothing wrong with carrying these. And actually, they don't get that much heavier because this one is a plasticky design. It's as light as a normal folder or a magazine, really. It's fantastic. And of course, if you're going to leave it on your desk, then having the large size is just really useful. If you're an artist, then I would suggest that the larger the better. However, you're going to want the best drawing tools, and currently the best drawing tools is the Remarkable. Importantly, if you care about handwriting neatness, I think you do need to go for at least the A5 size, because as you write, you will want to lean your palm on the device to make it as neat as possible. If you want handwriting, then this is definitely the one for you. This is the Supernote A5X. What features should you look out for? Well, certainly things like email and calendar are something that you might like to use. The A5X does have emails and a calendar app on here, which can sync to the cloud like any other calendar app. You can do those things on the Boox, but you cannot do them on the Remarkable, and you cannot do it on the Kobo, for instance, or the Quirklogic paper. So you need to be honest with yourself. If that's something that you really would use your e-ink tablet for, if you definitely need that on your e-ink tablet, then make sure that it has that feature. However, most of us would probably prefer to organize their calendar on their phone and do their emails on a laptop with a keyboard. So is this really going to be something that you're going to use that for? You have to make that decision. I would suggest possibly you're going to be really using it as your notepad to do your thinking with, rather than your productive stuff, your emails and your calendar. What about starting Word documents, where you can do that on the A5X and you can't on the Remarkable, for instance? And a lot of people want that feature of good handwriting recognition. And that's why I've been so impressed by the Kobo so far, because the handwriting recognition is excellent. And then it's there as a Word document in your Dropbox. That's a really smooth integration. These devices aren't really perfect for multitasking. They're really designed to be like a notepad and do just that. So just be aware of that. Ask yourself, if you really want something to replace a laptop and be great for multitasking, do you really want an iPad? But what you need is one where the Notes app is simple and easy to use and a real pleasure to use, because these can be things that you really want to take notes on. And that sounds like a funny thing, but I really enjoy using these for note taking, and it makes me write more. It makes me think more with a pen in my hand, because they're such a pleasure to use. And luckily, the note-taking apps are focuses of all of them, and they're made really well. So why are e-ink tablets actually better for your eyes? If you're going to compare e-ink versus LCD, it's all about the light. These are using the reflective light mostly. However, some of them do come with backlights. This one, for instance, I don't know if you've seen that, getting lighter and dimmer there. This one has a very blue backlight, whereas the Boox devices, they have a bi-color backlight. So you can actually change them from being a very orangey light or a very blue light. And it's the blue light that is the thing that damages your eyes. So luckily, most of the time, you won't need to use a backlight at all. And what I do with devices with backlights, I usually just leave them on about 10 or 15%. But it's the blue light from an LCD screen that really gives you that eye strain. And one reason is to get a kind of natural look. Manufacturers make the blue LEDs a lot brighter than the other colors. But because blue is the highest energy of the three LEDs, that does give you that harsh eye strain. The nice thing about using one of these alongside a computer is it just gives your eyes a little bit of a rest. So looking from an OLED screen or an LED screen, giving your eyes a little bit of a rest on something that is purely reflective, which is essentially ink on against a contrasted background. That is all it is actually really a nice thing in your day. It's just like looking at a piece of paper. And of course, the resolution can't be as high as a piece of paper, but it is perfectly fine resolution. Though you are not going to get like square eyes from looking at these things. There isn't much of a difference between the screens, because in fact, they're all manufactured by the same people. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that. The only difference is every year e-ink make a kind of slight improvements to their technology. So the latest device might have a slightly higher quality screen than a slightly older device. There is another slight difference between a Carter and a Mobius screen. The Mobius screens are like designed to be flexible, although none of them do flex, but they do have a kind of plasticky feel on the pen, Whereas the Carter screen, for instance, this one, it's a Carter screen, is a slightly glassier screen. It doesn't flex, it's actually made of glass rather than the plastic. And thinking about that feel, and they all kind of trade on this paper-like feel that they give you, do any of them really feel like paper? Well, yes and no, but it's actually kind of closer than you think. But at least they've taken the time to think about the way in which it feels to use them. And certainly I would kind of contrast two main devices, the Remarkable and the Supernote, because the Remarkable has a kind of feeling of a pencil and paper, and the Supernote takes an entirely different kind of view. It doesn't have a textured surface, but it has a surface that indents, and it feels like pen on paper. So there's a really interesting difference between those different things. However, what I would say about those different feelings is they're all good. And really, it might feel a bit funny moving from one to another, but none of them are like, oh, I don't like this, or if you were to use it long term, would it really annoy you? So is e-ink slow? There's a kind of thought out there that maybe an e-ink device is a slower device. Well, the thing is that they don't need the processing specs that an Android tablet needs, because they aren't going to need to run any of the graphics. I mean, you aren't going to run 3D games or do any kind of video editing on these things. So they don't need the power that Android or iPads need. They don't need the storage that they need either. So that's why the specifications seem like they're going to be a bit lower. What they need is efficiency. So the processors in them are usually chosen to not use up the battery power as quickly as a normal tablet processor might, and they've got better at making them feel snappy. So for instance, the Supernote just had an update whereby the pen latency and the page turn speed has actually got a lot quicker. And that's an interesting kind of update, because you certainly don't want to feel like you've got this laggy device. And in my experience, none of them have that kind of issue. They aren't going to get to the levels of the Apple Pencil, which actually Bluetooth connects to the iPad device, and it kind of predicts where the pencil is going to be. And so it really feels like the instant that you press down with the Apple Pencil, there's the mark already there. But there is that screen refreshing things, and some of them do this better than others. Some of them deal with screen refreshing better than others. Sometimes it's a little bit of a surprise when it decides to do a total refresh, and it is a little bit off-putting. But I would say most of them, once again, it isn't something that you notice. So if you're asking yourself, will I get annoyed with that screen refresh? The answer is probably no. So what's the difference between one that runs Android and one that doesn't? The Boox runs Android, and it runs full Android. For instance, you can even get the Google Play Store, so you can download any app here on the Boox device. Whereas the Remarkable actually runs a Linux-based system. It's its own Linux operating system. Now, most of the other ones, the Supernote, for instance, and the Quirklogic paper, they run Android, but it's a kind of flavor of Android. It isn't full Android giving you access to the full app store. It's Android so that they can run their own optimized apps, the apps that they've developed and optimized for e-ink. And that's probably what you want, to be quite honest, because I can tell you that the Google Play Store apps that are designed for normal LCD screens don't always work perfectly on these. For instance, OneNote, although it's there, and it's good that it's there, and you can access your OneNotes and you can maybe read something that you had there, and you could add some notes on there should you wish, it is far from perfect. It is not a perfect optimal integration. So don't buy one thinking, oh, I want all of the Android features, thinking that automatically must be better, because you might be disappointed when it isn't a perfect experience. So why don't all the Android apps work perfectly on these then? Hopefully you can see this here. There's a problem with the contrast. Because this is designed for a color screen, there should actually be a difference between all these buttons, which is just a subtle difference in color. And I can't really make that out on this screen because it's just black and white. Of course, I don't know what color all my pens are either. And I don't know if you can see, but some of the text just doesn't optimize, some of the written text, not just the handwriting text, just doesn't optimize well for this type of screen. It can't do the contrast between simple colors well enough to really be perfect. An LCD screen refreshes 30 times per second regardless of what's going on. So whenever you put a pencil to it, you're refreshing the entire screen anyway. And so making that mark means that it just refreshes the whole screen and shows you where that mark is. Whereas an e-ink tablet refreshes only on demand. It doesn't refresh until there's a page turn, because it's essentially just showing you the ink that it just printed onto its screen. And the way they get around that with the note taking is they are just refreshing a small area of the screen. So maybe you can see this when I make a mark here. What Boox has done is they've put their layer over this app. So you make an instant mark with the pencil and it then prints it. Now you see there's the palm recognition not working well in OneNote. So it makes a mark for you to see where you're working on, and then it prints that into the device in a OneNote. It's not a perfect integration because of the refresh rate. Boox are the closest to getting that integration across multiple different devices though. And I think that's their aim really, is to give you as good an experience just with that e-ink screen, so you get all the benefits of that. Does the stylus matter? Well, yes and no. Most devices use the Wacom EMR technology. I think all of these on the top here do, apart from the Quirklogic paper and the Kobo, which have gone with their own charged stylus. Now, there's nothing wrong with all of these. In fact, their paper-like feel, if you like, is really, really very good, equally to the other ones. But generally for me, the thing about a stylus is getting used to something. So you get used to the way that it feels, and it feels weird when you go to something different. The nice thing about the ones that do use the Wacom EMR technology is that you can actually use one stylus from one device on another device and it works just fine. The interesting one of the bunch is actually the Supernote, which has a ceramic nib stylus that never runs out. It never has a need to be replaced, and that's really good. Also, because it has this kind of film, it has this indenting effect, which means it feels quite like a pen. They're going for that premium pen type feel rather than the scratchy pencil feel of the other ones. The Quirklogic and the Kobo, they do have those buttons, which actually once you use them, you do kind of get used to them. But it's only briefly when you go away from that and you realize I don't have that, that you think, oh, I wish I still had it. It's not something that drastically improves your use and that you should probably pick based upon. And they get around things in kind of interesting ways. For instance, the A5X has this erase feature with 2-finger click. So you can actually put 2 fingers down and swipe across and that erases the thing. So in my opinion regarding the styluses, you should do a little bit of research and think which one you might like best, but you shouldn't make the whole decision based on it. So how would I personally use an e-ink tablet? Well, the way I use them is just to replace a planner. They replace a paper planner. So I was getting a bit sick of carrying around a thick wad of paper as my school planner, and I found the original Remarkable I bought to replace that. And it was a bit of a game changer, to be honest, and it started this whole kind of journey of making videos about them and being sent them for review, which is really cool. It replaces my planner, my organizer, and my notebook, and it's where I do the majority of my coming up with ideas and developing ideas. It means that I have this little bit of time in my professional day where I'm not looking at an LCD screen, which is a really nice change, to be honest. I noticed it incredibly during lockdowns where we were spending a lot more time in front of the computer, that I needed that eye strain break, but I still get those digital features. And it really splits up the use of devices between kind of thoughts and developing ideas to the more focused development of documents and communication that I do with a laptop. And I think most professional people will find that a laptop plus a note-taking e-reader of some type will be a really good mix for their daily professional life. What's the price of these e-ink tablets? Well, for the smaller ones, the MobiScribe I think is the cheapest of all, and that can be as low as about 250. The A5 devices, you're looking about 350 plus. I think the Kobo is currently the cheapest for the full kind of package, but you can actually get the Remarkable itself, just the device, for £300, up to around 400 and over once you've added in all of the case and everything like that for the Supernote and the Boox. And then up to 700 plus for the A4 devices. I hope that's been helpful for you to think through some questions, but here's some kind of general uses that might help you if you're sure that you have a certain preference for a type of use. Which one should you go for? For writing, the Supernote is the clear winner, and that's because the Notes app actually has a table of contents function, and you can also do the character recognition offline, which is fantastic. Remember though, the Boox, you can actually use Word. I will also say though that the Kobo is new to me and it is excellent. The way that you can start Word documents on here is really, really good. The handwriting recognition is really reliable. I'm just getting used to it, so watch this space for more on writing with the Kobo. But it could be a winner of this category in the future. Reading, the Boox wins. Okay, the Boox line of devices is definitely the best out of the current kind of crop as a reader. And the reason for that is because you get the choice of any reading app that you like. And luckily, all of their reading apps do work well on e-ink screens because they're basically designed for reading. The standard Boox Neo Reader is a good app for reading, but you can have any type of reading app that you want on this device and it works well. They have the much larger A4 device, which I would strongly suggest if you're looking for academic reading. And of course, they have the smaller one that if you're kind of read for pleasure and you want to read on the beach or you want to read in bed, then this smaller 7.8-inch device is the one for you. So if it's a reader you're after, but you want the extra feature that you can write on it, then I suggest going down the Boox route. Again, special mention for the Kobo. If you've already got a smaller Kobo, then this is a great thing to have as your kind of second device to also use in your professional life as your note taker, but then you can also read those same books and probably continue where you left off from your bedtime reader, your other Kobo by your bed. If you already use a Kobo, that's definitely the choice. If you're an artist and you want to use these for sketching, well, the Boox do a good job of sketching, but certainly the Remarkable is the best one for drawing for me. It's got the best feel for drawing, it's got the best pen tools for drawing, it works really well with the layers, and you can export as a SVG file, which of course works really well with things like Adobe Illustrator. I will say though that the Boox is very good for drawing on, and of course it can integrate with other artistic apps that you use. So you could upload directly into Adobe app for then working in the cloud on a different device. For work, I think again, the Boox devices do win because they just have the most chance of integrating with your workflow. You can have any app that you use for work on here, and that is a really useful thing. However, the Quirklogic paper is probably the best for collaboration. If you and your entire workforce decided to go for the Quirklogic paper, then you could really get a lot out of the collaboration features that are baked into the device. It also is possibly the most secure of the devices, because if you wish, you can actually have a Quirklogic paper server on your own secure system, and you can know that all your files you're working on together here are not in the cloud per se, but they're on your own secure server. But the Boox is the best for planning, for calendar, for workflow, for office apps, and for organization. But I will say that Supernote have put the right features for professionals in the device. You've got a calendar, you've got email, it can essentially be like a filofax for you. Another use that I personally really like these devices for is presenting, because I'm a teacher, and the best for presenting is the Quirklogic paper. And the reason for that is because you can actually share your document live to a web app. So you can put on the screen a web browser with the file running live, and every mark you make on the screen here is just displayed full screen on the screen, which is linked to another computer. So it's really quite seamless. You can share screen with many of them. You can share screen with the Remarkable, but it has to share to its own app, and you can share screen directly to Miracast and things like that with the Boox. Again, you've got so much choice, you can stream in so many ways here. But what you can't do with, I think, any of them is plug them directly into a display board. And that's something I would love to be able to do, is just to have a dongle to connect to HDMI and actually just directly share my screen straight to a large TV at the front of my classroom. And the last one I'm going to talk about, the last comparison I'm going to make here is, if design is the most important thing to you, then the Supernote just wins. The reason for that, a lot of people will go for the Remarkable because it is a beautiful device, but it's got that kind of cold metallic feel, whereas the Supernote has this sort of plasticky feel, and that feels like that's going to be the cheaper and the one you're going to like least. But actually that's a kind of warm to the touch, more like paper feeling. Also the folios they've designed are really, really nice, and the pen, etc. It feels like a notebook. And given that all these things really do, the best thing they do in any case is replace notepad and paper, I feel like that's an important thing. And the metal also makes it that bit heavier feeling as well. Perhaps not what you want in this type of device. So RM wins aesthetics, it wins ease of use, it probably wins the build, although they're all very good for build quality. Some are plastic and some metal, but they're all very good for that reason. But the Supernote also wins most durable because of that plastic build as well. A lot of people are saying the Remarkable is quite a fragile device. It also wins the accessories and for just feeling like a notebook. So I hope that helps you decide on which one to buy. It's been as exhaustive as I can make it. List of all the different questions you might have and some comparisons between all the different devices. Let me know in the comments which one you're going to go for and why. and let me know if you've got any questions about these devices or ideas for future videos. And if you want to compare the top three note-taking e-readers, the top three 10.3, the A5 ones, the Supernote, the Remarkable and the Boox, then this video here is going to be the one for you.